improve the teaching of mathematics and science. So we have fortunately been able to commission Mr. Victor Matonzi, and I'll introduce him shortly, who will report on what interventions we've put in place to try and improve our maths and science performance, what impact these interventions have had, and importantly, what he is going to do is to give us a sense of why some interventions work and why some interventions don't. And that's a really important process which we are having to undertake to maximize the significant intervention or sums of money that we put into these interventions. And it's for that reason that this is a really important moment in our education experience since our reforms of 1994. So I'd like to check if Dr. Mlungisi is with us. Nozipho, is he able to be here yet?
Not yet, Chair. He's just sent me a message to indicate, Program Director, that he's still struggling.
All right. So in the absence of Dr. Chele, let me welcome you, but also ask Ms. Nozipho Mawema from our NACI Secretariat, who has been guiding and holding this process together here, to say a few words about the exercise and also to do in place of Dr. Chele the formal welcome, please. Over to you, Nozipho.
Thank you, Program Director. Our really sincere apologies for the hiccups this morning since Dr. Mlungisi is held up. But just because we've lost a bit of time, I'll be quick and just to indicate where this project comes from. NACI, some of the guests might be aware that we normally publish yearly the indicators booklet from which we would monitor trends on what is going on in the National System of Innovation. And amongst the trends that we picked up was the stagnation in terms of the pass rate and the performance in maths and science in schools. And because this has a bearing on the National System of Innovation and the pipeline that leads to the higher education system and ultimately to the kind of skills that we require in the National System of Innovation, NACI wanted to understand why we are struggling to sort of move the needle, despite the fact that we have put in place government interventions as government, particularly our sister department, the Department of Basic Education, which we have partnered with in this project. So basically what the researcher will take you through is a presentation of what we have found in terms of why are we struggling as government to see the changes that we want to see as we're putting in place all types of interventions from the private sector and the public sector. So thank you with that, Chair, but without wasting a lot of time, just to indicate that we have, as part of our panel, members of the committee which were appointed by NACI to help us to undertake the study and who have contributed invaluably towards the outcome, the research process. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much. So what we're going to do now is to take the report from Mr. Victor Matonzi and to say that it's been a real pleasure to be working with Mr. Matonzi over these last almost more than a year and a half now. So Mr. Matonzi works for and leads the NGO DMC Precision, and they were asked to undertake this review for us. He comes to this exercise with a great deal of experience. He's been working in education for the last 25 years, has extensive experience of working in government. He assisted me in an exercise which I undertook for the ministry many years ago, and I was very happy to have Victor alongside of me. We've been working with Victor now for these last 18 months and taken reports and responded to milestones, important milestones in the work that they have done. And I'm happy to say that we feel that there is important insight to be gained and shared with everybody in this exercise. So I'd like to ask Victor to make his presentation now, please, and also to introduce his colleagues who are going to support him in this presentation. So Victor will have about 30 minutes or so. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you very much, Prof. I'll ask Isaiah to project the presentation. In the meantime, I'm joined with me here, Professor Rihanna Valley. She's now a retiring academic from the University of Pretoria, has been part of the team. And Ms. Buitumelo or Miranda Malele. Miranda has been in education for as long as I remember. We have worked together in a number of projects, and she came to this project with a wealth of experience, having worked as a Deputy Director General of Education in the Limpopo province. Before then, she was also with the Department of Education. So we would have loved to bring all other members of the team. Two of them are currently preparing for their graduation as PhD graduations, so they could not make it to this particular meeting. Isaiah, let's go to the very first slide. Yeah, this whole undertaking was about assessing the effects of the various interventions that have been implemented across the system to improve participation and performance in mathematics and science, including the impact of initial teacher education on school level interventions and outcomes. The brief was quite crisp, was to provide a dipstick measure of the extent of change resulting from the initiatives and the factors influencing the outcomes, whether be negative or inhibiting or attribution. We also had to look at the systems or institutional arrangements that are in place to support the implementation of the various programs and to provide recommendations. Next. The location of the study was within the National Strategy for Math, Science and Technology, and focusing on basic education in ITE, as we have, as I've already indicated, and looking at programs that covered learners, teachers, schools, districts, implemented at different spheres of government. These programs involved those that were publicly, privately, and funded collaboratively, and also their evaluations. Some of them were implemented through the funding from domestic institutions, others were by international donors. I should note that the implementation of the national strategy was first assessed by a ministerial task team in 2012. And then subsequently revised in 2018. I think the ministerial task team made a number of suggestions which are in the report, and also 4 broad recommendations that eventually informed the design of the revised MST strategy. I should also know that the study aimed not to evaluate each selected intervention, but rather to assess the effects that these interventions have had as reported in the various evaluation reports. Next. Next slide. Isaiah. I think the problem was Muspa has already alluded to, the unsatisfactory performance in mathematics and science, the system's performance in math and science, and the lack of credible, comprehensive, and coherent picture about the interventions that have been implemented, despite the resources that have been invested in the sector. Next. It is kind of an assessment, was quite complex. The nature of the undertaking required that we apply our mind as to how do we approach it. And one consideration was to look at the various elements of meta evaluation and meta analysis, and found that not one model fits the kind of work that had to be undertaken. And then we decided at that time that we need to borrow elements from different approaches, and came with a hybrid model that considered specific elements that we deemed applicable for this kind of study, and which involved the review literature, including the review of the theory of change of the National Strategy for Maths and Science, which we found to be a little bit inadequate in terms of the way it has been explained, and then we sort of extracted the spirit behind it and constructed the assumptions underlying the three pillars of the strategy, and then analyzed the various reports. As I've already indicated, the hybrid model also enabled us to develop instruments that assisted us in selecting the relevant reports that we thought would provide more relevant information, and to test or to collaborate information that came out of the reports. We undertook conversations in the form of interviews with various stakeholders and a survey of some kind. Thank you. Next. As I've already indicated, the inclusion and exclusion criterion was developed for the selection of the report, and we assessed 24 reports. These included 2 IT research projects, which were not necessarily an evaluation of a program, but an undertaking to understand the conditions under which initial teacher education was taking place in the 5 universities. The reports were commissioned were undertaken by JET, generally referred to as ITER. Next. There were some challenges in accessing reports, and I think we'll talk to that as we conclude with the presentation. This general lack of reports. It's quite difficult to access reports. The standardization aspect of it, of the various methodologies that have been employed to undertake the evaluations. It's like trying to compare apples and bananas, and trying to find a common ground was quite a challenge, because generally some programs are multi-focused and they varied in interventions, strategies and objective statements, and to a large extent the engagement with stakeholders proved to be quite lacking in providing the necessary information related to the program that we're evaluating, because of a loss of institutional memories, either because people were not aware of these programs, or they are new in the various designated spaces they were working in. and challenges associated with linking inputs and outputs, which also is associated with efficiency issues, because we are talking about investment versus outcome. So most of the reports do not speak about efficiency. I think it's also about the design of the evaluations that we have reviewed and how they captured the essence of the implementation of programs. Next. Yeah, broadly, we also looked at where we are as a country in relation to maths and science, and there is indications that the system is on the rise. Whether it's a positive or negative rise is something is very debatable, considering the number of learners who are falling off the system and participating in different types of newly considered maths and sciences, and that pass rate in North East schools has improved, and also in former Bantustans and Black African learners and females, that could point to issues of transformation, and there's also a number of Black African learners who are obtaining at least 60%, which according to data has improved or doubled between 2008 and 2018. And then enrollment for marginalized groups in universities, STEM-related subjects or courses has improved, although it has not reached a satisfactory level or the more appreciated level. But we also note that the system still shows that the quality of maths grade 12 is still not surpassed, with mark over 40% was very low. So we have got improved pass rates, but in terms of the level of passes, it's still not at the required or the rate that the system would love to. Next. And that also should be read in concert with the targets of the NDP. When we looked at the institutional arrangement, we found that following the recommendations of the ministerial task team, there has been movement in the department. The unit has been established that is dedicated to maths and science, and also academies or institutes in provinces. Some were there before, others were established afterwards, and there are also directorates responsible for maths and science. The strategy has been revised, as I've already indicated, and now has got an explicit theory of change. And on examining it, one would say that it is adequate in terms of what needs to be done to improve the participation and performance of maths and science, and how various undertakings can be collaboratively implemented to achieve that particular goal. And that there's adequate regulatory frameworks. The system, it's interwoven. And also there has been measures to integrate the various initiatives through strategies, plans, and guidelines. And that funding has also been made available through the conditional grant, for example, Funza Lushaka for ITE, and then the private sector continues to support government's initiatives. But also there were unintended consequences. They are observable unintended consequences, especially when it relates to planning between DBE and provincial education departments, largely because of the distribution of power function and accountability. One department is responsible for policy, the other TIA is responsible for implementation. And the lines of accountability in terms of our resources and our programs are implemented are compromised by that. And also that the district level, which is the front line, has been blocked by insufficient personnel and lack of capacity and infrastructure. If for example, if teachers have to undertake collaborative exercises, district have to make follow-ups with schools. All these have been undermined by insufficient personnel. This is despite the fact that there are guidelines to improve on that. And then there's also lack of monitoring, evaluation, and enrichment capacity within the system. This is very key because it points to how programs are designed and implemented, or it's either the implementers, especially at provincial level, may not necessarily have confidence in the findings of the report. There are a number of assertions that can be drawn from that. I'm saying this because of all the provinces, none could provide any evaluation report, despite having made numerous attempts, including support letters from NACI and the DBE, showing that perhaps the implementations are not informed by previous experiences. So every time there's a program, it must be new without necessarily having learned from the previous experiences. So that is one of the critical problems that we have identified, and we make firm recommendation to that effect. Next. We categorize the programs into three. It could be more also, but we felt that three would give us an indication of the nature of programs that are being implemented. One is the blueprint, what we call blueprint programs. Those are programs that are comprehensive and implemented over extended period of time. These include, for example, the Naledi, the primary math science research projects. We also identify pilot studies or pilot programs, which are mainly short-term gain-orientated and address generalized contextual challenges and social imperatives. Normally, they are undertaken like also by private sector and small scale responded to emergencies like somber realities of grade 12 failure rate. It's like if there is what is considered to be a crisis at that point in time, there is an intervention, and after that, the intervention fizzles out. Next. Initially, as Chair has already indicated, we wanted to look at programs that have worked, programs that did not work, problems that show both. And we sort of considered, after recommendation from the reference group, some kind of conceptual terminology that these will be highly positive outcomes, and then you have moderately positive outcomes, and those that did not have any, those that had low or negative outcomes. Those that had highly positive outcomes, mainly looked at them from a characteristics point of view, would be well-organized programs, those with well-articulated theories of change, with clear objective statements and outcomes measures, those that would be able to be those that are very clear, that can be monitored and outcomes be clearly measured and communicated. They are collaborative and government-led, with funding and monitoring and evaluation. They administer sustained and multiple dosages that include the time, adequate support materials, and more often will be appropriate. They incorporated curriculum leadership training as part of the program, and they were generally aligned to the curriculum and they were sustainably supported. Next. The timing of the programs was identified as very important for programs that have had positive outcomes. If you look at the curriculum change, because we also observed in one of the interventions, in some of the interventions that were implemented and not necessarily aligned to the curriculum topic, some were implemented long after or maybe towards examination because they were targeting results. So alignment to the curriculum and the topic and the topical issues was critical for the success of the program. And they were run by competent practitioners, both at the level of project management and professional. The involved functional schools, it's one of the most interesting aspects that we picked up, that this general view that investing in schools that already are functioning is more likely to yield positive results than dysfunctional schools. One would it has to do with selection, with what I would say selection bias. A case in point was an example in the Northwest, where only good schools were selected, and also I think the Naledi schools selected schools that already had functional management and competent teachers. So the nature of schools or the performance of school also was considered. Specific implementation methodologies for theory research. If you look at the programs that adopted some kind of model, they seem to have a more positive outcomes than those that were haphazardly or just implemented because there was a pronouncement that we have got a problem in this particular area. I know that the cascading model has been queried, in terms of its efficiencies and efficacy to yield the results. It's quite a debatable space. It is an argument that if it is well executed, it could be a very useful and sustainable kind of intervention. But yeah, there was an example that we found to be working, notwithstanding the challenges that is associated with, and then with the sufficient instructional time, some programs, as some teachers would refer to as, for example, the continuous development programs, as microwave orientated, where you have got teachers attending sessions once a month for 3 hours, which is equivalent to about 12 hours a year, which they felt that it is not adequate. And yeah, the issue of monitoring and evaluation is quite central, especially for programs that have got a longer duration, because that allowed for for formative evaluation and intervention measures to be deployed to where deficiencies are observed. So the whole issue of time and the duration of the intervention was quite clear in our assessment. But that does not mean that short-term interventions do not work. There are good examples of programs, for example, the primary maths research program in Limpopo, which was implemented over 14 months, and the results were quite astonishing, but notwithstanding that it adopted a particular model of implementation, not as a haphazard model. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. The moderately positive outcomes, one would say it involves a combination of elements of both successes and shortcomings. I'll not talk about successes because I will just reflect that on them. But the systemic planning and the poor quality programming was a limitation, and poor baselines, not clearly linking inputs to outcomes. It would seem that at times programs are implemented and not because not targeted to specific weaknesses, say it, for example, among teachers, and not necessarily looking at what teachers really lack, but a generalized approach to say, because the school is not performing well, it means teachers would have this challenge, or there is insufficient provision of this and that, and then you deploy resources without targeting specific area of need. So the lack of baselines and lack of not linking inputs and outcomes has proven to be a challenge. Inadequate resources in program schools. Although there is a lot of investment in, especially in previously or in underprivileged communities, but there's still significant evidence that we still have some way to go. So implementation becomes a challenge, as lessons learned may not necessarily be complemented by the required infrastructure. The socio-economic challenge, well, this is a generally known challenge that we have. Mainly programs that are implemented in poor communities. Say, for example, it involves ICT. It will be done, but at home or beyond the program contact time, support is not necessarily available for a number of reasons. There may not necessarily be resources or books or whatever at home, and lack of ICT, which is today's the platform for engagement, for sharing of ideas, even among teachers, to improve on collaborative planning, improve on collaborative teaching, require this kind of resources which are not necessarily available or are not necessarily adequate in rural settings on many of our schools. And inadequate infrastructural time, as I've already indicated, programs sometimes tend to be very short and not sustainable. Next. Those that had negative outcomes or low outcomes, they were poorly designed. They lacked TOCs, not based in any evidence of intervention. They demonstrated broad, ambitious objectives and outcomes with no clear indicators. Short pilots and imagery response orientated, it will achieve one or two things in terms of the objective statements, if they are, but without necessarily making an impact. And those are largely small scale program that I've already alluded to earlier. Ad hoc and fragmented simplified approach. It's a classical example was a program implemented in one region in Gauteng, where planning was quite poor at the end of the day. The end result was quite negative, even lower than the national average in terms of metric pass, grade 12 pass in maths and science. The issue of trying to scale and to take the programs at scale without necessarily considering the available resource. Maybe it's because of the need, but yeah, it has been found that sometimes programs are tempted to do a lot with minimal resources, and as a result, the dosage was not adequate and infrastructure and instructional time. not enough tasks for learners, and home-based support I've already indicated in the programs that have moderately achieved outcomes. Lack of instructional leadership development. This is one area that was cited on in a number of sources and also complemented by or collaborated by some officials that we have engaged. And then lack of formative assessment of programs. Next. Initial teacher education, I mean, information on this arm of the system was drawn largely from the 2 ITER reports and the findings of the ministerial task team. The general observation from the 3 sources, key sources, is that the coherence, the structural and conceptual coherence with the school curriculum and context within which teaching and learning takes place were not in sync. There seems to be a disjuncture between what the Department of Basic Education expects and what the higher education sector or the universities produce in terms of the kind of teachers that are supposed to teach at that level. The work integrated learning component, it was found to vary in duration, organization, and in the quality and content of learning experiences. And I have had this first-hand experience on this. It is not like it's about everything in every institutions, but there is a significant evidence that the work integrated learning component of it may not necessarily be adequate. This is despite the guidelines that have been developed for the department by JED. And in actual fact, this issue was also highlighted in one of the Human Resource Development Council's report that that process, that guideline has not been put into effect with a view to streamline the various programs that are being implemented or that are being offered by higher education institutions. Next. Then we made 6 broad recommendations and specific recommendations. On institutional learning, we strongly felt that we need some kind of centralized planning that will enhance coordination, reporting, and accountability. And I know that we have been made aware that initiatives to this effect were underway, and there's a need to periodically review the implementation of the strategy. If one looks at the MST, the first iteration, it was only reviewed about 11, 12 years after it was launched. And the second iteration, it's in its fourth year, if I'm not mistaken, and it has not been reviewed or whatsoever in a comprehensive manner. So we strongly feel that evaluations or reviews should not only be done on specific programs, but also at systemic level to ensure that there is continuous guidance on how informed guidance on how programs are implemented. And that MST programs should be considered special programs. These MST schools are an extension or a replication, intended replication of the Naledi schools, which proved to work very well at that time. But there are reports that the MST are not necessarily performing as they were. And the lines of reporting, because now they have become integral component of the system. We strongly felt that perhaps programs like MST should remain special projects and accounted for at the level of the ministry than currently is. the DBE should ring-fence percentage of conditional grant for pure math, because maths and MST now includes all forms of mathematics and sciences, and how funding is used at provincial level. It's a different ballgame together. It is dependent on what the provinces consider to be a priority at that point in time. So we are of the opinion that conditional grant should, a certain amount of money or should be ring-fenced for pure maths and science, excluding the other maths and sciences. Next. The issue of language and teaching, we recommend improved the proficiency in law. The thing is, it's quite a complex thing. Recently, there was some debate around the accelerated introduction of first language or mother tongue instructions in schools. Good as it looks, but it is facing a challenge. Internal migration is one of those, and also other nationalities coming into the country can pose a serious challenge insofar as the application of language of instruction in our schooling system is concerned. So we are recommending that policy should reconsider early exposure of learners to English in early grades to minimize the challenges of transition from that grade, from grade 3 to grade 4, and notwithstanding the fact that there is evidence that learners do better when they are receiving instructions in their mother tongue. But we do acknowledge that, but at the same time, recommending that maybe it's high time we look at the reality of the communities within which education or within which teaching and learning is taking place. Yeah, the system should intensify programs aimed at increasing the proficiency of English for teachers and learners. It was found in one of the reports that not only are learners affected by the use of English, but also teachers themselves also encounter challenges in giving instructions or using English as an instruction of learning and teaching. Next slide, Isa. I'm almost done. The teacher supply utilization and development, this is twofold. You have got the ITE. We are saying there's a need to accelerate the implementation and monitoring of MATEC and the guidelines for initial teacher education as developed. The DBE should develop a clear program of engagement with universities to accelerate the implementation of IT guidelines. There's no need to develop new or to reinvent the wheel. The guidelines are there. All that needs to happen. It's the implementation of those guidelines. And if there are challenges, then they can be reviewed. And that the higher education system should standardize the assessment system of mathematics and science initial teacher education. And on inset, there's a need to conduct baselines before an intervention to avoid superfluous designs, introduce block release and residential training programs. It was found that because we don't have adequate replacement teachers within the system, when teachers are involved in development programs, their classes are unmanned. Where they are manned, it means the teachers that remain at schools have experienced workload, and as a result, the syllabus is disrupted, and that we also need to and residential training programs. I think these recommendations also came out very cleanly in the MTT assessment of the implementation of the strategy. Also to introduce study leaves for the teachers and provide qualified or assistant teachers to maintain quality and mitigate the disruption of them, and improve quality assurance of programs. Next. Leadership development. Alongside the quality of teaching, instructional leadership is very central to the delivery, but has not been given adequate practical attention. We are recommended that there's a need for in-curriculum leadership improvement. The observation from the report is sometimes it may be because of lack of capacity or lack of numbers or lack of access. Whenever there is that engagement between the district officers and the schools, the exercise tend to be more administrative than focusing on the content. And then we are recommending that firstly, there's a need to accelerate compliance to the implementation of guidelines on the appointments of district level officials. I think there is also a ratio of some kind that has been determined there, and also to ring-fence funding to accelerate training of subject advisors and HODs on curriculum leadership. I think this should also extend to teachers, because in one of the reports, it was found that because of decentralized nature of management of the curriculum, senior teachers also play a very important role in curriculum support to their junior peers. Second but second, okay. The learning and teaching support materials, improved ICT access and use. Data shows that, I don't know how that it's about 64% of the schools in this country have access to some form of ICT, but how it is used, it is not adequate. It is not very clear. Sometimes it may not necessarily be used for teaching and learning purposes, but for administrative work and for coordination between district and the schools. We are recommending that, and this can also be understood within the context of access by learners, and the kind of content that should be carried by this guide. We are recommending that the DBE DSI, in collaboration with the Postal Services Department, should engage relevant providers to develop and provide zero-rated apps and applicable norms and standards for use by teachers. This would also help to mitigate the efficiencies around learning and teaching support materials. In one study on the merits of workbooks and textbooks, it was found that the addition of workbooks to textbooks, which is a national government program, was not necessarily a cost-efficient way, provided that the centrality of the teacher or the capacity of the teacher is good enough to use a textbook. If that is the case, you wouldn't need workbooks. So if there are zero-rated apps and different materials are uploaded for access by both the teacher and the learner, maybe that could also help mitigate the cost of learning and support material. And accelerate the provision of facilities, equipment, and online-based learning teaching support material. That's exactly what I've said. The last one, the last one has to do with the issues around management, evaluation and management of information. We are recommending that there's a need to strengthen monitoring and evaluation and information management within the system. we looked, for example, at the from the outset, we checked various platforms, the DBE, Provincial Education Department, even at the level of the DPME. There isn't much you can pull out from the website. So we are saying that the DBE should set aside a dedicated budget for monitoring and evaluation of programs. Maybe it could be from the conditional grant, and incorporated into the research and development strategy of the DBE. This is not the first time that such a recommendation has been made, so that in a way we are just driving the point home insofar as this recommendation is concerned. You find it in the JET recommendation on National Curriculum Statement Review. We find it on the review of the implementation of IPSTED. There's a need to conduct an audit and incrementally build a knowledge base on programs through a dedicated repository facilities. Exactly what I have just said, that there isn't a centralized repository system for information management. And linked to the central planning recommendation, the DBE should establish a panel of experts to quality assure program implementation and evaluation, programming implementation and evaluation, that regular developmental reviews on the implementation, design, and evaluation methodologies would help provide scientific credence and improvement on intervention planning. This stems from looking at how evaluations are conducted. At one point, we engaged the Gauteng Department of Education officials who had actually given us 2 reports. And then they recommended that we shouldn't include the report in this evaluation because they were not comfortable with the approach or the quality of the report, and that the findings themselves were not valid to warrant inclusion in the whole integrity. So that pointed to some challenges. And when we also reviewed the other report, because of the differences and the lack of specific areas for reporting, showed that or demonstrated that maybe these some gaps in the way evaluations are conducted and findings are reported. So we recommend that some kind of a development approach should be considered and through an expert established at the level of the DBE. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Victor. Thanks for those very useful slides. So what we're going to do now, colleagues, is take some responses from 2 experts to the report which Victor has produced. And to facilitate this, we're very happy to have Professor Michael Kahn with us. So Professor Michael Kahn is an independent advisor. This is his status now in policy analysis, measurement, monitoring, and evaluation. He currently is an honorary professor at the Universities of Johannesburg and the Western Cape, and is a research fellow of Stellenbosch University. But important about his experience is that he has worked in both innovation and in science and maths education. He was very involved in the establishment of what is called SESTI at the HSRC, and was also the founding professor of science and technology education at the University of Cape Town, and also served as an advisor to Mr. Kada Asmal and to Minister Ben Ngubane. So very happy to have you with us here, Michael. I'd like to hand over to you now, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Crane, and greetings to everyone in the room. It's wonderful to see the variety of participants, many of whom have been in the business of trying to improve science and math education, going back, I hesitate to say, more than 30 years. So it's a great collection of thinkers and doers. It's been a privilege, Victor, to listen to your work. You have really given us wonderful food for thought, a great presentation, very, very clear. And I'll say, if I have a moment later, after the others have spoken, a few words about that. The two respondents, between them, bring a wealth of experience. I've known both going back close to 30 years. Cyril Julie, Saatchi Chair at the University of the Western Cape, has been active as an educator, as a thinker, as a writer. I had a look at what's been going on in your publications, Cyril, and I see that you've done extremely creative work recently in a number of books that have huge citations, and that is really a valuable contribution to the state of the arts. Nick Taylor also goes back a very long time to the founding years of JET, and has worked both in JET as an independent as well, I think, Nick, and also driving the NIDU unit in the national ministry. So between the two of you, you bring an amazing range of expertise. I'm not sure who's going to go first. I don't have the program in front of me. So alphabetically, I guess it's Professor Cyril Julie. If you would give us your thoughts, please, Cyril. Thank you. Cyril Julie, are you with us?
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me?
I can hear
Hello?
you, so everybody can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Do you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, we
Yes.
can see you, Prof.
Try and share it, Prof.
Okay, do you see my screen?
No, Professor, can you try and share, click on the share for us?
I
you have
did go to
just send
share
it to me.
screen.
There's a button below that says share screen.
I did share the screen, and I see the screen on my computer.
Yeah, you need to click it for us, Prof, to be able to see it. You click on the share screen and then you click on the presentation for us to see.
Yeah,
If
now
you
I
have-
need to go.
If you have challenges, you can send it to me quickly.
I can see the screen.
Can everyone see the screen?
I cannot, I'm afraid.
No, no, Cyril, we can't.
Professor, can I walk you through sharing it for us?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, there's the share screen button below. You click
It's a
on it.
green button.
Yes, and then you click on it and then click on the actual presentation for us. After it pops up, click on the actual presentation. And then you
I've
click
done
the
that.
share button. And then you click the share button for us. Just
Share
down
again.
below. Yeah, you click the share screen and then you click on the presentation and then you click the share button just below, down the one the screen that's going to pop up.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
So what do you do now?
You need to share it. You click the share button. You need to click it twice. So now you're going to click on the share screen, and then you click on the actual presentation. And then after you highlighted the actual presentation, there's another button below the screen that will pop up that says share. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Okay.
What is the presentation? Okay. Click on it. Okay. Can you put it on a presentation mode for us? Just down here next to this. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Does everyone see it now?
Thank you, Cyril.
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, colleagues. Sorry for that hiccup. My response will basically be starting with disclaimers, then comments, then some issues, and then what I call a little gem. So my disclaimer is I'm not a policy analyst. I've not been involved in initial teacher education for more than 10 years, and I've not been involved in science education matters. So you've got to understand it in terms of my context. I'm driven by an informal chat I had with the late Jake Scherwel after he left the as DG in President Mandela's office. And I asked him whether democratic dispensation, what should we as the University of the Left do? Jake's response was, must critically support the state. And this is the ideological stance driving my current work related to continuing professional development of secondary mathematics teachers teaching schools in low socioeconomic status areas. So, some comments. I hear something. I think the survey is on current state of affairs is timely. And the linking of the document to Cognet prior documents, I think, is commendable. It mitigates the tendency to start afresh every time as if nothing exists on what the new is attempting to reveal. The intent to make informed policy decisions will also be beneficial for researchers, providers of educational interventions, and higher education-based curriculum developers. So I think it will have a wide impact on that because we can learn from the report. To me, the methodology is reasonably sound and has many points of contact with the sort of gold standard for systematic reviews, the Cochrane collaborations guidelines. As already mentioned, it's a meta-evaluation of 25 evaluation studies, and the outcome classification as referred to, high positive outcomes 9, moderate positive outcomes 11, and negative or low positive outcomes 4. My reading of this is that a fair majority of the projects or the interventions delivered what they were supposed to achieve. Another commendable aspect to me is the engagement the report had with meta-analytic studies, the one by Basharati and Sosotso, which delve into the issue of effect size. This is a rare phenomenon in evaluation of research on intervention in the country. Now, some issues. I think more care needs to be taken with the use of TIMSS, PEARLS, and SACMEC as service as measures. They are what people call the remote standardized national and international achievement tests based on some negotiated curriculum. The scores are standardized, and an increase in 17 points for math and 12 points for science are statistically reworked scores and not true achievement scores. The true achievement scores might be in the region of 3 to 5 marks actually. These scores that are reported do not have direct consequences for those who took the test. No HEI, post-school institution or employer use these scores for any purpose. The examinations to me that count are high-stakes assessments, such as school-based and end-of-year exams and the NSC examinations. They have direct consequences, as has been made clear, and what we try to address regarding grade promotion and access to employment and further studies. So my contention is modest. More attention should be accorded to progress in these high-stakes examinations in evaluations of interventions. We need to look at the context of high-stakes examinations in South Africa. They are individual, time-restricted, closed book, non-programmable calculators, non-access to the internet. And this context fosters an anti-fourth industrial revolution culture. So what we have here is a contradiction. We want the learners to be equipped to deal with fourth industrial revolution kind of work and so on. But our context of our high-stakes exams are contrary to this. Also, teachers are held accountable for achievement in high-stakes examinations, and they are assessed on scores on these high-stakes examinations. So for the fourth industrial, for the goals to be realized in schools, I think serious attention should be given for interventions to the nature of high-stakes examinations and to the current mathematics curriculum content, which are primarily of a centuries-old manipulations manner and mathematical puzzle solving, which are somewhat not taking into account what are the new kinds of mathematics that should be introduced into the curriculum to align with the fourth industrial revolution goals. It is also proposed that paper-based learning and teaching support materials be replaced by online ones. Now, I think at one level, this will shift costs to schools, and it will be a financial burden to parents actually, because schools will shift it to parents. I think an issue that needs to be pursued is, and I think it was alluded to, the notion of textbooks. What gaps in textbooks do LTSMs address, and whether textbooks can be expanded to include the so-called gaps addressed by the materials being alluded to. Another proposal is that ICT use must be improved. Now, if we look at that, in fourth industrial work environments and so on, ICT is used to do the job. In education, the job of ICT is merely a mechanism to deliver content for non-ICT based examinations. Now, in essence, to me, ICT devices in all forms and guises are used to teach things which these devices do well and mostly flawlessly. In fact, one can do the current NSC mathematics examinations completely by just using ICT. What this alludes to is that we need to give serious attention if we want to use ICT in examinations. What kinds of examinations questions should be posed and how should they be posed? so that students use the ICT to do the job and not the ICT devices just being used to teach things which these devices do quite well. I think the ultimate and implicit issue that the report addresses is what I term the uncomfortable, unresolved inequality in school mathematics achievement. This inequality is international, as pointed out by these coach in Britain and even in Norway. I pose it like this. Achievement in school mathematics assessment in low socioeconomic status environments is less than those in higher status socioeconomic environments. And I think this is the problem that internationally, if I read the EU reports and so on, that they are trying to address. So to me, policy proposals should be conducive for working towards the resolution of this inequality. Now, little gem. This happened on Saturday when I was working with teachers in a CPD workshop. The school is a school in a farming district in the winelands in South Africa, in the Western Cape, catering for grades R to 9. The story is a grade 7 to 9 science and mathematics teacher's story. This teacher taught grade 9 learners to use Excel in science to draw graphs, to find patterns, and so on. The teacher uses learners from the upper grades as peer educators for learners of lower grades. It reminded me of that film Stand and Deliver of the teacher Escalante in the US, where he also used students from upper grades to be peer educators for learners of the lower grades. This teacher also has a reward system for what he calls mathematicians of the month and the week. This reward system is learners have tea and cookies with the HOD and the principal at the end of the month or the end of the week, actually. These are learners who perform well, and according to him, it is not always the same learners. So perhaps policy proposal development might benefit from observing real work in real classrooms by real teachers under their real conditions. I thank you.
Thank you, Cyril, for a very thought-provoking set of inputs. Let us hold any comment on it, and because of time constraints, go straight to Nick Taylor. Thank you, Nick.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Michael. I don't have a presentation, colleagues. I'm just going to talk, make a few points. In fact, I'm going to make 3 points. Partly to endorse Victor's recommendations and partly to elaborate them a little. I found this a very useful report, which covers a lot of ground. And I thought it's useful for all stakeholders involved in the effort to improve MST education. That is government, NGOs, donor community, research workers, and the higher education academic community. So I just want to say 3 things quickly, and these are really 3 priorities for government. First of all, Victor's recommendation regarding coordination. And yes, there are structures in place. The MST strategy is a really good vehicle for doing this, but he points to certain difficulties between the DBE and the provinces. And I want to endorse what he says about that. And I think the DBE should take a stronger leadership role, be more proactive in assessing the work of provincial departments, in directing them more strongly, and overall coordinating the implementation, the planning, implementation, and evaluation of projects. But in this regard, I want to say that, a lot of CPD work is undertaken by donors and NGOs, and partly by universities. And many of these projects are done in coordination with provincial departments. Many of them just operate on their own. And I want to say that this is a large area of activity that should be brought into the fold of the MST strategy as well, and should include government's attempts to coordinate the field. Now, I don't want to inhibit people by having a heavy-handed government regulation project for the DBE. Because on the one hand, it's important for 1,000 experiments to flourish and to experiment with novel approaches to CPD. But there's also a great need to keep collating the results of these experiments, to interrogate them for systemic lessons, for policy and practice, and to identify gaps in our collective knowledge base. The private sector spends more than the government does on CPD programs. There's a lot of work going on there. But a lot of it doesn't come into government's policy net in terms of assessing what the implications are for policy and practice. So I think I want to make a strong claim in that regard, and a strong recommendation. Victor does make the case for more coordination, and I want to say that this should include the NGO and donor sector. The second point I want to make is, Victor's recommendations are very comprehensive. They really do cover a lot of ground. And that's important. So I don't want to undermine that. But I also want to say, comprehensiveness is the enemy of prioritization. What should we prioritize here? And here I want to bring in something that is not mentioned by the report, and that is the question of early grade maths. Colleagues, I think we're all familiar with the strategies used by kids up to grade 7 and beyond of doing unit counting for performing the 4 operations. Eric Scholar exposed this practice that is widespread across the country. He exposed it more than 20 years ago. And we still haven't got to grips with it. And it's a really, really pernicious problem, because, if kids can't do the 4 operations efficiently and effectively, they don't have a career in MST. There's no way they can make progress if they don't grasp the concept of cardinality. So yes, they've got ordinality, they can count. You tell them to do 3 + 5, they will make 3 marks on the page, they will make another 5 marks on the page, and they'll count all the marks. That's an ordinality approach to calculations. They don't see the 3 as a number and the 5 as another number. So they haven't got the relationship between number and quantity. They haven't grasped. Elsewhere, I've called it symbolic reasoning. They can't work with numbers as symbols. They have to actually count them all the time. So that's a huge problem. And I want to say that we need more research on this area, because it really is the key problem holding us back as a nation in the terms of the MST field. Yes, it's important to focus on the top end, on the high school, which we do very well. We really do push in that direction. But, if we really want the top end to experience a quantum leap forward, we would address this problem of primary grade maths much more rigorously than we're doing at the moment. So that's my second point, colleagues, just to elaborate Victor's list of priorities. The third and last thing I want to say is to endorse his recommendation about evaluations. You know, so many programs, I mean, if you read his report carefully, you will get frustrated now and again by projects that never did a baseline and hence could not evaluate their impact. You know, I wonder what the point of such projects is. Yes, they may be assisting a few kids to do better, but are they? We don't actually know. If you don't evaluate a program rigorously, what is its contribution to our knowledge base? It's really nothing. And I think here, the DBE's coordination role should be even stronger. It should, and Victor makes this recommendation, it should annually collate all the results of various evaluation programs around the country and put them together in a common report that assesses the state of play of the field. And you know, in regard to evaluations, programs that don't do evaluations, as I've said, I'm wondering if they even have a purpose, or are they really just wasting money and time of all the actors involved? But the other thing about evaluation is, and this is almost an even worse problem, programs sometimes do evaluations, they come up with negative results and don't publish those results. And I understand why they don't, because they don't want to be seen to be having done a project that didn't work. But the findings of negative findings are even more important than positive findings. Because if you publish negative findings, you are telling people, don't use this model. And if we don't do that, then other programs are going to jump on the same bandwagon. They're going to use the same model and they're going to reach the same failures. That is a massive waste of time. So yes, it's difficult to publish negative findings, but you know what, guys? We're not really contributing to our knowledge base if we don't do that. I'm going to stop there. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, colleagues, for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nick. I just want to do a process check with Crane and Naki. We're quite over time. We do have a short break, and we've got a deadline of 11:30. How do you propose we manage this interactive part? Should we carry on without a break?
Yes.
Crane says carry on without a break.
Yeah,
and,
please.
Okay, I would appreciate assistance if we're going to do that from perhaps Nozipho, if you monitor any chat comments. Ahead of that, if we have the facility to allow very brief inputs from the House, but I really would urge participants, please avoid making speeches. Make a very sharp point of a minute so that we can collate these and refer them back to Victor and his team. And then I'll draw it to a close and hand over to Naki to finalize things. Will that work, organizers?
Yes, that's fine, Michael. Please, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mlungisi. Clearly says it works. I perhaps can impose quickly. Mlungisi, would you like to say one or two words because you were not with us at the opening? And then we'll take it random after that. Mlungisi?
No, thanks, Michael. Let me allow other people to give us their comments, and then
Your generosity. So the floor is open. Indicate you wish to speak with your hand, and somebody will help us recognize you. I can't see everyone.
Okay,
Awesome.
there's a question on the Q&A for Professor Julie.
I don't see hands. That's my problem. So I need help.
There aren't any hands right now, Professor Khan, but there's a question on the Q&A for Professor Julie. And if I were to try and quickly summarize, it basically says we do not have problems with first-year students. not being able to handle ICT, they learn it very quickly once exposed, but we do have problems with students not being able to simplify fractions, solve equations, interpret graphs, apply vectors, understand magnitude of numbers, work with units. These are basic things forming part of the age-old mathematics manipulation skills, but students absolutely need these for academic progress in any physical science or technology field. Please do not take away from basic algebra and geometry. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you wish to respond, Cyril, to that comment?
Michael, I prefer that it's a long discussion that, so I prefer that the person sends me an email and we set up a meeting so that we can discuss it actually.
Thank you. That's okay. Let's close that topic. Any other? I'm really going to push as quickly as I can. Any other topic from the House? Muzipho?
I don't see anything else.
In that case, allow me to say a few words myself about this piece of work and the comments that have already come in. One fairly obvious observation to make is that the report itself, as well as the panel, reflects a major concern with mathematics rather than science itself. This is absent, and it's a kind of curiosity to me. I don't have a clever answer for why it is, but I'm simply drawing the attention of the House to what I think is fairly evident. If you reflect on Victor's slides, it was math. Nick has spoken very eloquently about the problem in math, and I think Cyril as well with his very strong background in math ed. So park that one. Secondly, what has not been discussed in any depth, other than in the photograph and the story that Cyril presented to us of that school somewhere in the Winelands, is the actual teacher in the classroom. Who is the teacher in the classroom? And how well equipped is that teacher to actually undertake this horribly complex task that we expect that teacher to exercise? It's there by implication in one of the recommendations on initial teacher education and talking about the lack of understanding we have of what constitutes the detail of initial teacher education. Before the session, I had a look at one of the major schools of education, and they very nicely tell you how much you're going to pay for each component of your B.Ed year by year by year. And they say you're going to pay X amount for teaching practice. But what is teaching practice? How long does it take? For how long is it set? How is it constructed? How is it evaluated? That's not evident. So for me, what is very important from what Victor and his team have given us is to start questioning in greater depth what goes in ITE. Then there's this whole beautiful idea, again, back to Cyril, reminding us of what Jake Schervel said. Basically, it's time to engage with our state rather than filling in the deficiencies of their state, which is what was going on pre-1994, when there were probably in the order of 100 NGOs working in math and science education. I was involved with one, Cyril was driving one, John Volmink, who may still be in the room, was driving another. It was a very dense web that in many ways gave us the first new cadre of subject advisors, people who had staffed those NGOs, joined government. They were in effect carrying out Jake Schervel's mandate. And the shift in the country was that NGO land was now something of the past, and it was the state, our state, that was going to deliver. So what I think would be very useful if Victor is going to do any revisions or apply his mind further is a little bit of then and now. A situation analysis in 1994, what did it look like then? at the time of doing your grade study, what does the situational analysis look like? And this starts to inform Nick Taylor's point about the difficulty of coordination between national and provincial. And let's remember the constitutional principle that is at work, that this is a shared responsibility, which means national can't impose. And that makes the whole art of coordination political and extremely difficult. I want to go further. The whole issue of language. Victor, you've been very brave to say what I think needs to be said about language. We can't avoid it. And I've made the point elsewhere that teaching math literacy is actually language teaching. It's less teaching math, it's all about communication. And it's largely done in English and Afrikaans. And therefore, the expectation is that both the learner and the teacher or instructor, whatever the current name is, are really competent to enjoy that exchange in a meaningful way. And to add to this is what it's maybe amateur empirics, but the length in terms of word count of a math lit paper is 3 times what is in the ordinary math paper. And the curriculum statement runs to 4 times the word count. I'm simply saying the language demand is very, very real. So I've done a bit of a summary here. I think that the essence of what has come through in the Matonzi report really hits everything where it has to be hit. Whether you can prioritize it, Nick, I'm not sure. So in effect, what I've done here is to be a little provocative, maybe not provocative enough, because I've said nothing about the real elephant in the room. And the real elephant in the room is the role of organized labor in curriculum delivery and in modulating the exchange between provincial and national. You cannot remove the role of organized labor in determining how this evolves in practice in the school. Even deploying a grade 9 in the place of a teacher for certain people in organized labor would be something troubling. And there is nothing in the report on this, this key element, and maybe it is too difficult to deal with. I don't know, and I perhaps wouldn't like to be the one to try. So I've thrown a half a dozen grenades into the room. If there's a bit of time, people might want to take them up, particularly Victor or anyone else, Cyril, Nick, or any of the other people who are listed as panelists. Let me hold back and see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Quickly, can we recognize Professor Vijay Reddy? The hand is up.
Thank you, Vijay. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks to NACI for initiating this study, which is, you know, it's part of a number of studies that have been done to look at effectiveness of programs. I can only rely on the presentation, and it's just now that I've opened the report that has been shared with us. And please, mine is a question based on lack of information, and therefore it might be completely out of line. So please rule it as such. So I notice on page 27, the key questions are, what were the interventions that were implemented in schools, districts, provinces, and national to improve maths and science? What impact, what factors, were they appropriate and targeted? I would have liked, I think what I am not clear about are these initiatives state-driven or from the NGO sector? In other words, looking at those kinds of, so it's the initiative, but the initiative that had an evaluation. And a quick look at your list here, and again, excuse me if I've got it wrong, a number of the initiatives that are listed in this list, it doesn't have a date next to it, but I think that just knowing the field, they pretty, these are evaluations that have been done a long time ago. It's not, I'm not sure the extent. It would be nice to look at these evaluations and to have a date on which this was done. And I mean, the one that I'm looking at is the Dinaledi Schools Initiative, and I know that there were evaluations that were done around 2005. So understanding it in terms of the current context and understanding it in terms of time will be very important. I also think it's also important to understand, if we're looking at initiatives, and I was hoping for a typology of the initiatives that have been undertaken, and to also ask the question, why didn't some of the big initiatives undertake evaluations? The one that is missing here from this list is the NECT initiative. It's a massive initiative running side by side with the state. And I don't see any analysis of the impact of that those initiatives on the learning incomes, on the learning outcomes. So it's important to also try to analyze the silences around why these kinds of initiatives have not been evaluated. Also, I think it might be very important to sort of try and frame this in terms of the relationship between the state and the non-state initiatives, and try to draw some sort of lessons from that point. Yeah, I think, as I said, I would like to read the report and perhaps raise more questions, but my initial thoughts on just listening to the presentation and scanning through the report that is shared on the chat. Thanks.
Thank you, Vijay. May I give the microphone back to Victor and his team? Would you like to respond to Nick, Cyril, myself, Vijay, and then we'll do another round? It's a lot to ask of you, but would you like to do that?
Thank you very much. The last two questions, the dates and the NECT initiative. If Dr. Reddy was aware, we did highlight the limitations that we encountered in accessing reports. I think with the NECT, we probably sent more than 10 emails trying to request evaluation reports and telephone communications. I'm not so sure if it was a reluctance on the part of the NECT, despite having sent the introductory letter or letter of request signed by the DG at the DBE, the NECT, the NACI CEO and the DG at DSI, but we could not find any report from the NECT. Maybe such programs might not necessarily have been evaluated also. In terms of the dates of the evaluations, the list in the report does provide the dates for the publication of the various reports. The absence of recent reports may be indicative of lack of evaluations, as we have highlighted that it doesn't seem that a lot of reports, a lot of programs have been evaluated. They have been implemented, or if they have been implemented, the reports are not made available to the general public. We tried everything under the sun. There are NGOs, for example, that have also assisted us in providing reports, Net Center, Zenex Foundation, you mentioned them, AIMS, but generally access to the reports is a problem. Hence, even the recommendation speaks to how reports or evaluations could be consolidated and stored in a facility that will be accessible to everyone. So that aspect is covered in the report.
Thank you. So do you want to
unless
take
my colleagues want to say something?
You don't want to take it further at this point. I see as a panelist, Professor John Volmink. John, I hope you're still with us. Would you like to make an input?
Yeah, Michael, I'm still here, but I wasn't here all the time, so I went in and out. So forgive me if I'm addressing something that has been said. But I was part of this team in a sense that I was on the committee that gave input, and I just wanted to make again the point that when we move forward from here, we have to decide that we're not doing so as civil society going one way and the state going another way. And therefore, I would have loved to have seen a little bit more attention given to the documents that the DBE has put a lot of thought into, which is called the Mathematics Teaching and Learning Framework for South Africa. And it's subtitled Teaching Mathematics for Understanding. And the reason why I say that is that there tends to be a lot of emphasis on some aspects of mathematics in particular, and de-emphasizing certain other aspects, even in this framework that I've just referred to, which is based on the work of Jeremy Kilpatrick, speaks about mathematical proficiency, which depends on 5 intertwining strands of, and that you can't have one without the other 4. Now, what the DBE has done in their report is soft pedal the one, which in my stage in my life, I put a lot of emphasis on, and that is the human side. Not so, I'm not, by saying that, I'm not underestimating the importance of strategic competence and procedural fluency and conceptual understanding. However, Jeremy Kilpatrick talks about what he calls productive disposition. I call it the human side of mathematics. And I think successful projects must show respect for the human need to make sense out in mathematics. And as Jeremy Kilpatrick says, perceive it as both useful and worthwhile. To believe that efforts in learning math pays off, and see oneself as an effective learner and doer of mathematics. A lot of the reason why people's achievement in mathematics is so low is because they don't believe it's a human activity. They believe it's for special people, like special athletes that you send to the Olympics. And yet it is an everyday activity. And I was looking for examples of that, and I don't see it. And so that's my comment, Michael. I can say much more about that. I just hope that some mention, some credit will be given to that work, whether we agree with it or not. The mathematics framework for South Africa as a guide for bringing together civil society and the state as we move forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I see the hand of Jayanti Maharaj. Won't you go ahead, please? Jayanti, are you muted?
Yes, sorry, I think somebody muted me. Okay, maybe most people know me as Veena Maharaj. I'm from basic education here at DBE. Good morning to everybody. Yes, it's a very interesting report that has been presented. But in the absence of the actual report, it's very difficult to actually comment very specifically on certain things, but I will try. And hopefully at some stage, we would at DBE be able to access this report. I hope that is possible. Firstly, I just want to talk about the fact that there are so many NGOs and other service providers who, from as long as I can remember teaching, which is a long time, they've been there doing a lot of work. But the results don't seem to speak to this, and that was perhaps that was actually the problem that initiated this study from what I read in the email. I hope I'm right there. I think the report has addressed a lot of things as to why maybe where you have achieved positive results from the interventions and where you received not so positive or negative results from the interventions. But what I wanted to say is that where the report spoke about the positive results, it spoke in terms of the leadership training, alignment with DBE curriculum, the competence of the implementations, the functionality of the schools, etc. But what I didn't see I didn't see anything, but maybe it's there in the report, but I didn't see anything that spoke directly to the specific problem that is being addressed in terms of why the results, and I'm going to speak specifically to physical science, why the results are not showing the desirable effects that we wanted to see, the desirable improvements. I didn't see that, and what I mean by this, the specific problem that speaks to the subject itself and the link between that problem that one is trying to address with these interventions, or those problems that one is trying to address, and the teaching or support strategy that is addressing this problem. I'm not seeing that. I can see more like high-level, generic kind of reasoning, but I'm not seeing this right at the basic level of the learner and the teacher. Maybe I'm just missing that. What I'm talking about, for example, if one looked at physical science and delved deep into the performance of learners from grade 10 to 12, one might be able to see that perhaps learners know at some level the content, they have knowledge, but they probably don't have clarity about the concepts. They cannot link concepts, or they cannot solve problems, and the reasons why they can't solve problems. And then I would expect the intervention to actually hone into that problem and try to address that. I can see a lot of other things, and look, the results in physical science, as we know, has been improving in general, with drops here and there in certain years, but the quality of passes is not one is desiring. We actually want better quality results. And if there are so many interventions and so much of money, as this meeting has already spoke to, so much of money has been spent, one is actually expecting better outcomes. I want to get to something else now. And that is on the language. I know where it's quite brave to say, make some of the recommendations here regarding the language. But what I wanted to say is that Afrikaans has been, progressing quite well, with English, and perhaps one should look a little bit more deeply at the African languages. I know the meeting did talk about people from other nationalities coming in, and perhaps the situation is getting complicated. But notwithstanding that, perhaps the research, maybe I don't want to make a recommendation here, but what I want to say is maybe the research should look into promoting, bringing some kind of mother tongue language, the South African mother tongue language into the picture, and see where it is going. I know some people have tried some of this, and we haven't seen I haven't seen very desirable results regarding that, but perhaps more funding into this, into mother tongue instruction with the South African languages, if that could be looked into, it would be a good thing, and we can see where that's going to take us. Otherwise, I hope to see the report so that I can get a better understanding of what has happened. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jayanti. Further inputs from the House? Anyone else? I can't see any hands. Nozipho, could you assist?
Thanks, Prof. There's a comment that was posted by David Silman. He asks the panel, he or she asks the panel, how does the panel propose to induce intervention implementers, both government and NGO corporate, to adopt a better system of causal linkage of programs and change in learner performance? There's a second comment, Prof, if I can get through, from Annette Davids. She asks is it possible for the report to reflect on what actually happens inside the maths and science classes, actual teaching during the periods of the study? Are we seeing actual improvements on time on tasks? My apologies to David.
Thank you for those two inputs through Nozipho. Before I ask the panel to respond, I recognize an old colleague, a young colleague, Sharanjit Shan. Would you like to speak to us for a moment, please?
Yes, thank you. I like the idea of being a young colleague, as I am nearing the end of my 8th decade. Just wanted to greet everybody and just say a few things. Victor, thank you for the report. I hope we are all going to get the report. One thing that I haven't heard a lot about, and that's been an absolute bedrock with which I am now nearing the 56th year in STEM education, is the issue of self-regulation by learners. Now that tablets have come in and we've started to raise funding for data and evaluate how data is used, while at the same time understanding the issues of wastage and temptation to all sorts of things that learners can be open to, it is really crucial that we begin to talk to learners. That we run a campaign called Youth Squared, Daring to be Different. And we work with learners to say to them their journey, their potential, especially within mathematics and physical science, because 4IR, as far as we are concerned, is well on its way, and it's going to introduce economic slavery for a very large number of our learners. With 5IR now embedding itself in terms of connecting the human condition to mathematics, is also well on its way. I have attended a couple of seminars where critical thinking, empathy, creating thinking are being talked about in the context of STEM education. And it absolutely delights me. I'll just leave it there, but fantastic to see you all well, and please stay well.
Thank you, Sharanjit. I see one more hand from a very handsome person with glasses but no name. Who are you, sir?
That be Eric Scholar, I think.
I think it's Leonard. Leonard
Has
Molefe.
come in, and it's great to have you, Eric.
Thank you.
It's terrific that you're here, but there's somebody before
Okay,
you.
that's me.
That's
Leonard.
He's got the glasses.
Okay.
Yes.
Leonard, are you going to speak to us for a minute? I do want to give time to Eric.
All right. Okay.
Quickly. Leonard?
Oh, I thought you were giving
No, it's you.
You are first. Your hand was up first. So go first and tell us, please.
All right. Okay. I think Jaya raised very important points. I think several points that are very important, and they talk to what is in the report about agents of change. I think we usually underestimate agents of change, which are teachers. So what do we think of them during initial teacher education and beyond? Do we focus on these agents of change only during initial teacher education? Do we make follow-ups on what's happening to them beyond that? That is, after they have been trained. Because you can have intervention, you can have the best interventions in the world. But then if they are not capacitated, then it's like washing a child, and then the child goes out into the mud again. You wash the child goes back to the mud again. So we have to make that connection between interventions, initial teacher education, and beyond that. And there's another part that I thought we should also remember that this is very important. The chain is as strong as its weakest link. So the report gave us very important points in terms of what didn't work in those chains that were so weak, what didn't work. So the importance of theoretical underpinnings when a particular intervention is put in place is very important. You can't have ambitious objectives and outcomes. You can't have emergency response-oriented kind of approach with meaningless pilots. That won't work at all. You can't have ad hoc fragmented approaches. That won't work. And you can't be ambitious and think you can do more with very little. That won't work. And if the leadership, they normally say the height of the ceiling it's proportional to the leadership. If we have leadership that is really inadequate, then that won't work. And I think some of my colleagues talked about the importance of assessment of programs. That's very important. All these are so important that we have to look at them. We have to see the connections between them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molefe. Before I go to the last input from the House, which is Eric, I want to welcome you, Eric. The Matonsi report gives quite a lot of prominence to the work you did. And in particular, I want to draw the attention of the House to another idea that came from your work. And that is that, in effect, you have multi-grade classrooms proliferating across the school system that you looked at, which to me is a very, very intriguing observation. Also, of the evaluations that were referred to by Matonsi, I think that work stands out, but so does the World Bank evaluation of Dinaledi. And I would invite people in this meeting to engage with that. That's dated 2010. So Eric, your quick input, and then I would like to give it back to Victor for a final 1 or 2 minutes, and then hand over to Ms. Khumalo, who I think is going to close for us. So Eric, your input, please. Eric, you're on mute, are you? You've left
Unmuted,
us.
I think. That's it. Okay.
Carry on.
Can you hear? Okay. Hi, Michael. Nice to see you, and everybody else. Anytime we all meet each other and things like this. Look, I mean, I found it all very stimulating and some very good comments. And I mean, I could spend the next hour commenting on a whole lot of things that have been said. I just wanted to, the fact that you bring up this idea that classes have become multi-grade, is to just point out the general, one of the problems facing evaluations and presumably leading to a number of false negatives is the emphasis on teachers having to teach the content of the curriculum of the grades in which learners are enrolled. That assumes that they are capable of dealing with instruction at that grade level. However, stuff going right back from SACBEC in 2000, TIMS and others, have shown that the majority of our children are below the minimum level of standard required for them to benefit from instruction at a particular grade level. And I think that's leading to, I think that Sharon Jeet said, that children are becoming despondent about doing mathematics because children who can't add 2 single-digit numbers together have been asked to add 5-digit numbers together. And I think we have to acknowledge the problem of backlogs in the schools. To me, it's the overwhelming organizational or institutional problem we have at the moment. And unless that's dealt with, I mean, I'll give you one very quick story. I've been talking to a lot of young teachers recently, and quite a few of them are saying, look, I'm teaching grade 6 maths. Kids come into my class, they're counting on their fingers, they can't do anything. It's as if they haven't learned anything at all. So one of these young ladies, who I loved to hear, she was so enthusiastic, only a second-year teacher, she'd used half of her class period to try and do some remedial teaching in the basic skills, and I agree with what Nick said about early grades. It's called foundation phase for a reason, in order to try and help them deal with the content of grade 6. As a result, she fell behind on teaching the grade 6 syllabus curriculum and was disciplined or told to stop doing what she was doing by the department. And that shows a kind of conflict there between what's a reasonable thing to do. Of course, we should be teaching at the right grade level, but we're assuming that kids are capable of learning at that grade level and have the acquired knowledge to do so. If they don't, the main problem in terms of this seminar is that you're landing up with evaluations which are showing negatives, no outcomes, whereas they might in fact be very appropriate if the kids had been sufficiently prepared for the grade level they were in. Sorry, I could go on for hours and I'm notorious for doing so, so I'll stop there. But thanks everybody, it's been a very interesting meeting.
Thank you everyone up to this point. I want to give Victor 2 minutes to summarize any takeaways that his team or a member of his team wants to share with us. Victor?
I'm not so sure if any of my colleagues want to take this. Miranda, Rihanna. Are you there?
I have an unstable internet connection, but you go ahead, Victor. I'll come in if I can.
Okay, maybe just to point at Professor Volmik's input. The report, I think it's limited in adequately addressing the maths and science teaching learning framework around the human element, except that in its initial or the first part, where we're talking rethinking South African education landscape, we do make reference to the connection between what maths represent in the life of a learner, both in terms of what they do and what they find or what they will be in future, the benefits of doing mathematics. Maybe just to cite one interesting example of a child we interviewed in the Free State, who said that after completing mathematics, after grade 12, she wants to study until she completes PhD in mathematics, specifically at the University of Pretoria. And I asked why. she said she just wants to solve problems, mathematical problems and problems that have to do with mathematics. What I gathered from her after a lengthy conversation was that the interest in mathematics goes beyond just securing a good job or working in a productive economy, but also as a person who has interest in dealing with solving math and science related problems, and also that it sort of inspires her in a way to pursue whatever she wanted. Over and above that, we are saying that beyond participation or the practical aspect of the fourth industrialization and subject and the critical aspect of participation in innovation, it is also a solid foundation to contribute to a hidden curriculum of a personal and social values as the subjects are. Teach discipline, consistency, problem solving, analytical thinking, and other skills. So in a way, we make that reference, but not adequately discuss it. We can actually crystallize that particular aspect, because I think it is very important to link the subjects and the human element part of it. The question asked by Memaraji around what are the specific problems, I think this should be coming out of the interventions program, because like Dr. Mlife said, and the report is saying that if there is no clear specific area for intervention, you end up deploying programs that are not dealing with specific challenge. It is quite difficult from the reports that have been assessed to identify exactly what are specific problems in physics, because the reports themselves are not dealing with that, meaning that the programs literally did not identify the problems that they were attempting to address, which points to the lack of baselines and empirical study. But there will always be broad narratives around the challenges in maths and science, the issues of interest, the weak capacity of teachers to teach physics and maths, and lack of resources, lack of labs and stuff. So it's quite a broad range. But once you go through the report, you'll be able to identify, to see the issues that we have identified as some of the concerning areas in medical science. But broadly, the problem is with the programs of interventions that are not necessarily informed by specific areas of interventions. I'm not going to speak much about.
I think you need to bring it to a close, please.
Yeah, sure. David Silman, thank you so much. I think the area you are raising around connection or linkages between inputs and outcomes, it's something that the report has been speaking about throughout. And I think Dr. Taylor also mentioned that if that is not the locus of the intervention, it's very fruitless. So the recommendation speaks to that, on how this will be dealt with in future once the idea of coordinated approach to programs implemented by both public and private sector has been addressed. Yeah, I think those are a few things that I think some of the questions have been answered in the comments made by members of the panel.
All right, thank you very much, Victor. I think that brings my session to conclusion. And in the interest of time, I should hand back to Professor Sodin, who will introduce his colleague, Ms. Khumalo, Ms. Funeka Khumalo. Craig, is that all right?
Yeah, all right. Thanks very much, Michael. Thank you very much, colleagues. So we're scheduled to close earlier, but I think the importance of what we're talking about here has justified us running over time, and I'd like to thank all of you. But we are now going to ask our councillor, who has responsibility for taking this report to the NACI councillor, Ms. Funeka Khumalo, to do a summing up and a closing. So over to you, Ms. Khumalo. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Prof. I hope my video is looking much better than in the morning. I hope I look much better. Thank you, Prof. And thank you to the team that put together the presentation and the report. This, indeed is a very challenging project, and it addresses math, science, and technology, and it's what feeds into innovation, for the future of the country. However, there has been quite a few comments around silence on the T, which is technology, and even more emphasis about the report, more heavy on mathematics than science and technology. And I think the team has put a note on that going forward in terms of the inputs that came from the colleagues. And I think one other thing that I have also noted is that perhaps it would be valuable to have the report up on the NACI website before the webinar, so that people have time to engage with the report, so that when they ask questions, they have had time to engage with the report. However, we've had, very good engagements. I was listening attentively. Thank you to everyone for the passion that is coming through. Everyone involved, you can see the passion that they have for this subject. So it has been indeed a very valuable morning. Thank you to everyone. We had over 60 participants, and thank you for the questions. And those questions that have not been addressed, the team will endeavor to do that. And if there are any other inputs that anybody wants to send through to the Secretariat, please email that to mavis.masia, M-A-S-I-A, @dst.gov.za, so that those inputs can be taken in by the team. On that note, I would like to thank everyone who participated in the session. Thank you to the team. And thank you so much for all the inputs that we've had today. I don't know if CEO, you have a comment before I hand over to Prof. Sudin.
No, thank you. You have done excellent work. I must thank you and other members of council who joined us as well, the panelists and everyone else. Just to say, Ms. Funeka, that we will keep updating colleagues about the report. It's still going through approval processes. So our bosses, council, will receive the report in a few weeks' time, and then they will apply their mind. And then from there, it will be submitted to the minister and the Minister of Basic Education. So those are the processes that the report would still need to go through. And then, of course, Victor and the team, hopefully, will engage with them in terms of what should be done with some of the suggestions and interventions. Thank you very much. So we hope to see some colleagues on Thursday and Friday at our colloquium.
Yes, we'll see you on Thursday. Thank you so much, CEO. Over to you, Prof.
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. Khumalo, and thank you for those very insightful words, and also to you, Mlungisi. Thank you. So, colleagues, we come to the end of what I think has been a really important moment in thinking about where we are as a country in maths and science. And clear to all of us here are the complexity of the issues that face us in coming to a sense of how we might respond. And I really appreciate both an emphasis on these cognitive challenges which Nick has raised, but also those extraordinary human and social ones that came up from John and Jayanti and confirmed by Leonard. And we clearly now need a whole lot more time. We need forums to discuss the real learnings which have come out of all of this. And I hope that we have coming out of this, Nozipho and Mlungisi, we have the basis on which NACI could be organizing future events such as this, and to think about how this sits in relation to this real big challenge of innovation, which our country has to undertake and resolve. So thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you for your time. I'd like to say goodbye to all of you now. Thank you all very much. Thanks. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Michael.
Stick around, Nozipho.
Yes, Prof.
Okay. So just to say,